Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third discussion of The Judging Eye by R. Scott Bakker. This is the first book of the second Apocalypse series. No, first book of Aspect Emperor, fourth book of second Apocalypse. Today, we're talking about chapters 9 through 13. The chapters are also known as This Fucking Kid, These Fucking Kids. Oh, good, a break from these kids. Oh, no, this kid again.
I don't think I've ever heard you curse. I'm already the first time.
That really took me aback. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, what's going on?
I was like, whoa.
I hate that kid. I hate him.
Are you hearing voices? Justin's losing his mind. Oh man. That was hilarious. That's awesome.
So with me, I have the usual group of friends. Dan's not laughing so hard, so maybe you can start us off with the introduction.
Sure. Why not? Yeah, I'm Dan. I've read the books before. And no, I'm not shocked by cursing. I guess Varsha, I've never heard Varsha curse. I just assume she does it in secret, but
I don't, yeah, to my family and people I know are comfortable. So
nice. Yeah, Carl? I'll pass it to you.
Who was that? Me? Okay, sorry. I'm currently buying the next two books in the series right now, so you're really getting the play-by-play from me. I'm Carl, first-time reader of the series, loving it. Judging Eye in particular, I mean, it's easily up there with Warrior Prophet. I may even like it more. We'll see how this thing ends. And we're going into the Mines of Moria, so I'm pretty excited.
Steve,
If you're enjoying it that much, I think you will love the last section. Sorry, my voice is still in and out, but anyway, I'm Steve from Page Train, and it's my second time reading this one, and there's still things I'm a little bit confused about. So maybe Dan can help us without. I'm trying to figure out how to ask the questions without spoiling things. But Varsha, I think you mentioned having some confusion, but we'll get into it. And Justin.
Hey, I'm Justin, first-time reader. Also really enjoying it and considering converting to Yatwerianism.
Yeah,
The old lady did it for you. I see.
that was the game changer. It's like, oh, there's no going back after that.
No. Yeah, I can't even be kink shamed out of that one.
That I honestly totally forgot because I read this in like two halves basically, and one was I was traveling over the weekend, and so I read it while I was traveling, and it feels like a billion years ago, even though it was like 3 days ago. And that scene I had totally forgotten that was in this section. That was wild. Every time we get the Yatwerian cult, it's like something new and crazy. I'm digging it. And yeah, I have no idea what the hell was going on there. I mean, like it was followable, but it was shocking magic craziness.
but before that, the first time we meet Satma Nana Fairy in this set of chapters, I think it was in chapter 10, was it? What are we reading? 9. Chapter 9, the section where the White Luck Warrior or White Luck personified somehow shows up. Is he the warrior or is it just some sort of form, White Luck taken form? What was happening before that? I didn't understand. Like it went on, there was this refrain about a life forgotten, and then it gave us some history of some people who were descendants of people who lived 200 years ago. And then I guess we got a couple of those, or maybe just one. And then the White Luck something shows up.
Yeah. It's an explanation sort of the White Luck, of what the White Luck is, I guess. It's not, it's like sort of like he's just falling into, like stuff is happening and like it's already predestined to happen and he just goes through it. I guess. Like, he already knows what's going to happen. It's not like luck. It's sort of luck in the sense, oh, he's lucky that, for example, that thing happened or the other thing happened. But it's sort of like, yeah, it's like a prophecy, I guess. Something like that.
I see.
The weird dream memories thing? Because I interpreted that as that was the, like, Yatwerian, like, almost like cult memories or something. Because I thought we were in not whatever the high priestess is. What is her name?
Yeah, no, it's like, I think it's like describing stuff that's happening around him, right? Around the white light as he's walking towards the priestess. And it's sort of like everything, like he already know, like the gods already know what's going to happen. So he just experiences it pretty much. But it's already been like predestined, I don't know.
The dream?
He just uses the random causality of history to be at the right place at the right time with the right exact things to happen for what I guess he needs to do. It's really hard to explain.
Did that bridge or building or whatever that collapsed, did that actually collapse now? Or did it collapse 257 years ago?
No, I think it was showing the, like, you know, the path of, like, determinism, right? The initial set of actions that eventually determine what happened. So the builder saved some money by buying some cheap bricks upstream 200 years ago, and then that
it collapsed now in this moment.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, that's what I thought it read like. But also, why were the women and I guess the women and infant died, but did all these deaths now condense to make the White Luck warrior? I am the White Luck. He doesn't call himself the warrior, but are we meant to think that it's the warrior?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it the warrior?
Wait, so okay, I'm trying to understand this because there are definitely things I was not understanding, and there were things I thought I understood, but I'm less sure now. So we were watching the sequence of events that led to the White Luck warrior coming to that moment over history. Okay.
Yes.
Because how I was interpreting it was like specific sort of like cultic memories, like Yatwerian, not like of Yatwer herself per se, but of like worshippers over time, like the forgotten people, like mother and their children, you know, just like random, you know, because Yatwer is the goddess of like the nobodies, essentially, the people forgotten.
Yeah.
So it's based around, it's like showing a sequence of historical events that led to the White Luck warrior, who's, I also want to make sure, whose identity we don't know, right? We weren't supposed to be like, oh, I know who this is. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Yeah. But I think like the important, well, not the important thing, like the interesting thing, but it's not like the gods change what happens to make it so that the White Luck warrior succeeds or does whatever he does, right? But I guess the gods sort of like, the goddess like is seeing what's already knows what happens, and he's just like experiences or going through it. But I don't think the goddess is like changing what happens.
Okay. And the lines in italics, are those the warrior? Are we in his head right now?
Trying to remember which ones are those.
So there are these sort of confused statements. See, it feels confused. You look like you're dreaming. That's one. Wake up, please. You're scaring me. Then what have I done? All of these are in italics between the alive forgotten sections. And then and then the last one is praise be our mother. This is immediately after Satma tells him, we are siblings, you and I. Okay, that just made that last scene creepy, but yeah.
We're not really siblings, but
yeah.
Or maybe they are, but maybe not in this context. I thought those were like things people are saying in the background, but they're not crucial to the story, so they're just sort of, it's like background noise, sort of, I guess.
Oh, interesting.
That's what I thought, but I'm not sure.
Oh, I see. So is this the woman and the infant in the process of dying? Because
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because the first line, which is not in italics, is "Love, are you okay?" And then
Yeah, and I guess the white luck spirit or whatever possesses this person. Is that how it is? I don't think it's explained, but it sort of feels like it.
yeah.
That's definitely how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
So are we meant to think that Samarmus, the death of Samarmus, has something to do with this white luck warrior showing up? Because the last chapter, I guess, of when Nanaferi had that first vision of the goddess,
Yeah.
that scene was intertwined with the conversation that Esmenet was having with Maithanet and Samarmus dying. And then this one is intertwined with Samarmus's funeral or the grieving of Samarmus. And then immediately after that, it starts with a life forgotten and so on. So it almost read like there's a connection between the two, but maybe not.
That's an interesting parallel. I mean, I think definitely thematically, at the very least, if not metaphysically, like it's certainly very intentional that we're getting, both in terms of like Yatwer is directly is kind of the threat, the cult against Esmenet right now, and she's sort of the within the empire here, and this is her problem to deal with, right? That's what Kellhus tells her basically. But on top of that, it's a whole storyline about motherhood, really, right? And the forgotten people and kind of the undiscussed, the power, I guess you could say, of the people. The downtrodden. That's kind of the word I was looking for. But yeah, I don't know. I hadn't even considered that it might literally in some way be magically related. That's an interesting idea.
I just thought it was thematically, because there's even that part where it explicitly mentions the markings on the face, right, with the period blood and with the ashes in the different directions, right?
Yeah, that was super cool.
nice touch of yeah, I don't know, but those touches of traditions and things are pretty cool to read. Definitely, I think.
Yeah.
So I still want to hit on this just a little more because I'm trying to wrap my head around it to the best of my ability. So one of the repeated phrases is "a life forgotten," right? Which again feels very Yatwerian to me. We're dealing with that's who she's the goddess of, right? So was the point just kind of emphasizing thematically that, or is that literally we're following through almost spiritual successors of a woman, a particular woman? I feel that which leads to I can never remember her name. Satma Nanaferi. Because that's how I read it, was that it was all of these women who kind of, I don't know if they literally, but the spirit of Yatwer sort of metaphysically went through them. But I don't know if that's, if I was reading into things, because I totally missed the white luck part of it. I mean, I got that the white luck warrior appeared at the end, but I completely missed the we were seeing his origin through, time basically.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if there's more to it, or if it's just we're seeing the last sliver of a white luck that led to him getting her, and maybe there's more before. But yeah. But Justin, what were you saying?
Oh, just that to me, it struck me that section struck me as so impressionistic. It was really hard to parse, but that was Carl's reading was sort of where I was going with it too. Maybe there was some sort of passing between lives that was happening, but again so sort of intentionally opaque that I don't know. I read through it and then I read it again and I was like, I don't know, man, I feel like that's gonna be
Well, we don't know when the seed of this white luck was sown. Maybe it's a thing that, I don't know, Yatwerian priestess do like in the past, and that leads to like I'm not sure, but I could see that too.
So, do you think that they foresaw the coming of Kellhus, or and so set safeguards against him 257 years ago, or is it, like you said, just something they do on a periodic basis, just some every
I mean, if the
tri-century?
gods can see what's happening, maybe they saw Kellhus too. I don't know, because they seem to see like all these other small things happening, right? At least Yatwer.
Yeah.
But the cultists themselves
Wow.
were very much not expecting Kellhus, right? Because they rejoiced when Mathanet became the Sharia, and then like when he was sort of co-opted by Kellhus, they were like, "Oh, what the fuck is this?"
Yeah, definitely.
What was I going to say? Yeah. So about causality, then, I guess the other missing piece, I don't know if it was clear from this, is whether Yatwer intentionally planted this several centuries ago, or if it's just something that happened as circumstances coming together. Because then, like, do the gods actually control the causality of this world, or is it like, what role does Yatwer have to play if not? Maybe she's taking possession of the outcome of whatever's happening as a result of things that was sown 300 years ago. But is she just, yeah.
That would be absolutely insane if this is some sort of like cross-temporal chess game amongst the gods, and that if they can like actively see everything that's already happened and is going to happen, and they're like actively maneuvering against each other, which then makes you wonder, right, what Kellhus's role is in all this, because like, what is his deal? That they maybe did, if they saw him coming, then they couldn't stop him, but does he actually have like one of the gods possessing him? Is that part of the deal? I mean, maybe that explains some of his visions, right? He's like an avatar for one of the gods.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's supposed to be like a paradox. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a Christian theology, and even in Christian theology, there's something similar, right? Because you're supposed to have free will, but how can free will exist when God can see everything and can see the future and like, has a path laid for you and stuff like that? That's also like sort of a contradiction.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Damn, it's trippy.
We might get more information on that later on.
Yeah.
I had that same thought though, I think last week, just like what if Kellhus is, and similar with Kelmomas, like what if he's possessed by a god but not the one that he thinks it is? Or I also had the thought, what if Kelmomas is somehow being visited by Yatwer herself or something like that? Like, anyway.
Okay, I am going off of that now because I think that is interesting and makes some amount of sense. I do distinctly remember in Kelmomas' first chapter, we're supposed to associate him in some way with a Jokli, I think is the name. The god who's like a trickster god. Do you remember? He's like, I think he's like a fat, creepy, smiling god. And that kind of does feel like Kelmomas' vibes too. Kelmomas is kind of a trickster character.
Yeah.
So I think if maybe that's the voice, right? Maybe now that we know the gods are real, maybe he's possessed or an avatar or some sort of has some connection to a Jokli. Because I think that would make sense. I hadn't even considered this until, it seemed like something was communicating with him, but if it's one of the gods, that would make sense in terms of which god, just because in a lot of different ways, but not least because that's literally how he's introduced, is like walking by that statue and noticing it.
Yeah.
And you think maybe his pretending to be summer mass, whatever his name was.
Totally. I mean, whoever's talking to him, I do not believe it's Sammy, not Sweet Sammy. I think it's a red herring that it's like, oh, I absorbed the smart side of my brother. No, fuck, bullshit. I don't buy that for one moment.
Before we move on from this section and talk about that damn kid, I really loved A Life Forgotten, like how they kept taking words out of that. It has echoes of things we know from before, with the logos, for instance, where he had to take one word out from the sentence each day. But it starts with a life lived, now forgotten, and then just a life forgotten. That happens twice for some reason. And then just a life. I like what that did. Like I guess I like the layer of mystery and depth it added. I don't quite know what effect it achieved, but I like how it was done. This little cutting the word each time we repeated that.
Yeah, I agree. The rhythm, that scene is very evocative, even if it's like hard to follow. And I mean, I feel like that's almost kind of the point, is where it's like a tone piece as much as it is anything, you know. And I do think Bakker is very good at writing very evocative prose.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna take another shot really quickly while I'm thinking about this and while we're sort of talking about this. I'm now fully on board the train that these gods possess people and go through have avatars essentially. And Kellhus, so if Kelmomas is like a Jockey, and we've now got like White Luck Warrior who's whoever, some brother god, and then Yatwer and her priestess seemingly, right? The fairy. Kellhus, I think, could easily be Gilgail or Giljail, however you say it, the god of war. And when you think about it, he's surrounded by war, right? He's constantly promoting war. In fact, that's like the main thing he does. And he is the warrior prophet, right? And that is the main god we heard about in the first trilogy when Kellhus was having his rise to power. So that's me taking big theory shot there.
I like that too, because they even mention in the initial early chapters with the Yatwerian cult how Gilgal is afraid of her.
There you go.
How like her two most powerful siblings know that like she's packing heat, you know.
So it's maybe a secret war between the gods that's happening.
Yes, I think so. I'm increasingly, especially now that we're talking about it, I think that makes sense and feels very. And if you also think some of the things that definitely inspired this series as a whole were like the Iliad and the Odyssey and kind of the old Homeric poems. And like I remember reading that Bakker, like we have previously talked about how it can be difficult sometimes reading his big battle scenes because he just randomly introduces these factions. And that's something that I remember reading Bakker deliberately did to evoke like the Iliad and like old, poems. And I think even like Beowulf and things like that, because they were supposed to be like histories. Right. And so you have these like throwaway mentions to groups that the audience theoretically would know about. And given that, a big theme in a lot of those is that the gods are constantly meddling with mortals, and that it's all kind of one big chess game, and mortals get caught up in it all and get screwed over. And I think
they have their own champions and stuff. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so I think that would make sense, right? I mean, like that's how like Achilles, dies, right? Achilles' heel is like Apollo, goes to Paris and essentially gives him a perfect shot with an arrow right into Achilles' one weak point. So I think that would make sense.
Interesting theory.
I like it. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, I hope it's right.
Yeah, it's cool, right? Yeah, I go team. That was a group effort right there.
We were joking before about how we'd never play poker with Dan. I think our case was just made. Interesting theory.
It is an interesting theory, you know.
Whether it's true or not, it is interesting. Yeah.
Mhm. I agree. Yeah.
True. Do you want to talk about the now we're finishing, I guess, the Yatwerian chapter? Do you want to talk about the sex scene?
Oh yeah, we can do the whole thing in one shot. That made me incredibly uncomfortable, but yes, please.
It is very interesting. Like, I guess what happens is like he's just taking his vitality because it's sort of showing her becoming younger again, sort of.
Yeah, they like switch
But,
ages
yeah.
in a sense.
Yeah,
'Cause he's
and it
not
was
dead.
like very. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, he's not dead at the end, right? He's just old, right?
Yeah. I don't know if it really happened though, if it's like an illusion or whatever. I don't know what's actually happening though. It's very unclear.
Which is one of the reasons why I'm hesitant to call the thing that showed up the White Luck Warrior, because I mean she's basically sucked all the life out of him apparently. So is this guy going to be the main character for the next book?
Oh, I just took that for granted too. I just was like, oh, I guess it's some random person that we don't know, and all our theories are wrong.
Or is she gonna birth the White Luck Warrior?
That's
Interesting, yeah.
Oh, and if you could like rapidly age. That's a classic mythic trope, right? Is that like chosen, partly divine, like hero who grows up really quickly. So I could see that.
would be on theme with a fertility Yatwerian theme again, right?
Mm.
And also because she also before doing that she shows how she's still fertile, I guess, right? That's
right.
Like there's a whole page dedicated to that sort of.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'll never forget that one.
Yeah, that's burned into the memory.
I mean, it's very powerful imagery.
It is.
Yeah.
What I respect this series, I really like that scene because it does evoke a lot of like mythic magic and mythic storytelling that you don't see in a lot of fantasy. Like honestly, fantasy is often really scared to evoke certain, when it comes to like sexuality in particular, like sex was often associated with magic in like old myths, right? Like you famously, right? Like every pantheon has a fertility goddess, right? And that, there's kind of, it went for it is what I'm getting at, right? And using like the menstrual blood and sex to evoke magic, I think was really interesting. And obviously thematically works, and again is like that's a swing that a lot of fantasy series are not willing to take. So I admire it. It was written well.
And I love how it just takes the common like themes of fertility. Like the fertility goddess in most other books would be maybe kind, maybe demure or whatever, motherly. And here it's taking it's the same motherly fertility, all those things, but now it's become a strength. It's like something strong, something almost warlike, right? But also by giving. It's not like taking. It's strength in giving. It's, I don't know, but again, not in a very Christian sort of be gentle to someone else way.
Well, it also has the like aspect of like motherhood is scary and it can be violent. Like the act of giving birth is violent, and like there's that giving, but it's also like, I forget, there was a specific line, I'm sure I could look it up, but that read to me is very like Freudian in a sense. I mean, beyond the fact that you have the weird incest connotations, but that's not even what I mean. What I mean is like Freud was really obsessed with dicks, and he was convinced that like all men are scared of like being emasculated and having their dicks cut off. And there was something, I forget what it was, but there was some sort of language in the prose that was like basically like talking about how like Yatwer and like women, the mother, like in taking the man inside could like basically reversing sort of the traditional associations of the power dynamic that like, oh, men like take women, but rather it's like, no, like we welcome you in and can like essentially like cut your dick off, to be very crude, right? And I thought that was very interesting, right? To sort of like show this, like just like scary, powerful, but in not like the ways, you know, you commonly think of, and like particularly in like patriarchal cultures and structures, like this mother goddess. It's very cool, and definitely I think is much appreciated and interesting to see after, you know, I think we were all kind of open in the first trilogy that like there was a very limited like female representation and sort of point of view. And as like awesome as Esmenet was, like, you know, Sorweel in particular kind of felt flat, I think, for me. And it's cool to see such a range now, and to see like thematically for it to be so important too, these different perspectives on power.
Yeah, I definitely would recommend when you finish the series to go read some of the discussions about people and some of the blogs about people discussing this work and how it relates to feminism and different things. Because some people think it's, you know, it's bad, it's good, you know, depicting a woman, but it's like, I think it's a very good discussion to have. And it's a very interesting discussion. I've read a lot of good pieces discussing this and learned a lot of ideas, which I didn't know before. So I would definitely recommend when you're done about it. Like this specific topic is quite interesting, I think.
I wonder if, Carl, if you're talking about, I was just looking at that section, and there's on page 229 in this copy, it's the quote that says, "There is the knife that cuts, and there is the sea that drowns. Always we have been the latter, but now that the white luck has come to us, we are both."
I think that might be it, yeah.
I dog-eared that page because I'm a heathen.
So C's question is, dog-earing better or worse than writing in the book?
That's a good question. Which of the heresies is you know, more deserving of damnation?
I'm guilty of both.
Yeah, for me, this scene, the physical descriptions made me very uncomfortable. I did not like the way the period blood was used. It did not like it at all. But moving past that, I really like what you guys said about demonstrating power in what is traditionally considered a weak position, all the things that traditionally make women seem weak, or like the arguments that are used to call women weak, have been reversed here and made, I guess, symbols of power. I like that. I like that interpretation. Thank you for making me less uncomfortable with this.
I totally agree. And I, while you were Dan, while you were mentioning that you've read some discussions about this, like when I read this section, it reminded me of some of Silvia Federici's writings. She's a really interesting, like, Marxist feminist writer, and writes a lot about, you know, being that this world is so deeply patriarchal, like about the power that women have and how that was wrested from them very intentionally by patriarchal societies. And like, you know, these Yatwerian cultists are really trying to like wrest some of that power back. It's really great stuff. I think, you know, like dismissing this series as being strictly like, you know, patriarchal or misogynistic is just oversimplifying the issue. You know, I think there's a lot more going on, and I think it's cool. And it's sometimes very ugly to look at. Because, the history of it all is very ugly. Yeah.
I think the sex scenes in the series are sometimes a bit hard to read. They're weird and gross, but they're quite interesting a lot of the time, and they're also part of a plot. But also they're not, because usually sex scenes are more like, I'm trying to think. They're not exciting. You're not meant to be excited by them, I guess. They're not, you know, sexy or anything. They're usually about something else. They're usually about, I don't know, power or relationship between people or some other situation more than love. from
Definitely.
the ones we've seen up to now. Maybe Esmenet and Akamian, those are the only ones which I can see. There's just two people that love each other, but everything else was more about like power dynamics than any sort of sexuality or anything else.
I mean, I would argue that even Akamian Esmenets are about power dynamics too, and are very much about their relationship. I mean, I'm totally with you, Dan, that I think all the sex scenes in this series, from the beginning, as hard as some of them are to read, they have a purpose, right? They're not just like exploitative, or just there to arouse you or anything like that, or even just to make you laugh. Like there very much is a character purpose and a thematic purpose and even a plot purpose for a lot of them. And yeah, I mean, I think even Akamian and Esmenet in the first trilogy, which were definitely the most loving sex scenes we got, were still like exploring their complex dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument to be made that in every relationship it's always some sort of conflict or some sort of power dynamic or something like that. Some sort of hierarchy, either because of cultural influences, because of economic reasons. There's always that factor, right?
Well, and they're rarely like straightforward. Like often, I mean, particularly when you get to really intimate relationships, whether it's like marriages or like really long-term friendships or family dynamics, there can sometimes be like, a push and pull, right? Like not to make it like some weird competitive thing or anything, but like, I think even the notion of power, like what we might label like a hierarchy in a relationship or something, can vary depending, right? Like there's like one person could be like the breadwinner, it's talking about like marriages, for example, but the other person could maybe be like more of like an emotional, nurturing presence that like maybe isn't, we think in our societies as like lesser in some way, but is like has real power, right? And has like a real impact on how that relationship functions. And like there's, a push and pull dynamic in a lot of different factors, I think, of relationships. And yeah, I think you see that with Akamian and Esmenet.
True.
So I think I've mentioned this before, but it kind of bums me out when people give up on this series after the first book or so, because this book it's too the further we get into it, I think the more interesting the dynamic gets, and the more that it explores different themes, and it's not just a case of Bakker just trying to create the most patriarchal world that he can, and just there's so much more to be taken from the story. So it's kind of a bummer. While I understand why some people it's just too much for them, I think the people who stop just because of that one reason, I think they just wish they would give it some more time to develop and evolve the characters, especially because Esmenet's one of my favorite characters from
Absolutely,
as far anyway.
Yeah, same with me. At the start of this book, I was so like, it was so wonderful to have so much of her, internality. Like she's got a ton of stuff going on, and it's taken its time getting to this point where like we know a lot about her as a person, and now all of this responsibility is essentially thrust upon her, and she's kind of like been coerced into this very unenviable position, and like it's awesome. Like she skyrocketed to becoming one of the most interesting characters in the series for me with this book. Like before I was like, yeah, Esmenet's cool, but now I'm excited about it.
He's in a really interesting position right now. I've always been an Esmenet fan. I'll say it. I've been by her side even when she's been terrible. And we found out she sold her daughter into slavery. That was rough.
It's been terrible. I mean, it is terrible, but it's also understandable.
Yes, you can understand why she did it and the things that drove her to do it. That's like about the worst thing you can do as a parent, though. Like short of actually killing.
Well, it's a bit worse, but yeah.
Right. It's like top 5. Maybe top 3.
Yeah. But I still think the fact that she just really regrets what she did and wishes she never did it, like that shows to me like she's actually a good character. Like now that we're in her mind and that's how she's feeling, it's not just her saying that to people.
Right.
And it's such a strong like display of her, her position in this world. Like she has like no power, like she has to, she does it purely out of survival. It's like, the world as it exists coerces her into this terrible decision. And so it's hard. I find it difficult to judge her for that, as terrible as it is. It's like she had no other choices, at that point.
But even if it was like she just sold her because, I don't know, it's like very inconvenient for a prostitute to have a daughter. It's very like I could see a moment of weakness or something else happening, right? It's like very human to be selfish sometimes and to be weak.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I wouldn't. Yeah. Or even, they're not just desperate. Like it could have been. Like we don't know exactly what happened. Like we only heard her telling a king, I think. But I don't know. I would even understand if she did it for other reasons, like I don't want her to live the life of a prostitute, or
she sold. That we know why. She was starving.
Yeah. Well, that's what she said, I guess.
Right. I mean, fair enough, right? We didn't actually see the events. I would find it really difficult to believe that she tried to save her daughter from a life of prostitution by selling her into sex slavery.
I guess we don't know. Well, yeah, she probably knew what was going to happen. Fair enough.
Because that's what her dad did to her. She even thinks about it. Esmenet thinks like, I just repeated the same sin that was done to me by my father. And it's sad. And I mean, again, like I'm with you. I definitely feel compassion for her. I don't think that necessarily excuses it. If I was Mara, I don't know that I would ever be able to forgive my mother if like I was in her shoes. But I as a reader, certainly I can understand and sympathize, or maybe empathize is the right word.
I think it speaks to the hopelessness that some people in this world feel, especially the women at that time, because if she felt that was her only choice, that was the best choice for her daughter, then that speaks to the choices that they face, and I guess the alternative is the alternative worse of. What is the alternative? I guess. So I think that just the darkness that comes before. I guess
It's hard to say, right? Because we weren't in that position. We don't know necessarily what options are available to her, but it's certainly easy to understand where the desperation comes from. And this is still a problem today. I mean, parents still sell their kids into sex slavery, or any type of slavery. This does actively happen to this day.
That's interesting. You bring that up, the darkness that comes before, Steve, because it's like after the fact, as it occurs to Esmenet that perhaps she took this step because that was her darkness came before, that what preceded her was similar to the situation that ended up driving her actions.
That the sense that somehow people are doomed to repeat their parents' mistakes. But I don't know, what you said was interesting, Steve. There's a question there that I thought of. Did she do what's best for her daughter or for herself? I guess that would be my source of judgment, if any. Like, either way, I think she had very few choices. You can definitely understand that if this was what she needed to do to save herself, we can still understand that. So the worst of the two options is still something that does not necessarily bear judgment, but it is an interesting question to ask, I think.
I guess the follow-up would be, can she be redeemed?
I think she tried with and who can offer her redemption, right? I feel like even I guess the best case scenario was Mimara's like, oh, good, I found my mom again. Good, we love each other. Everything's happy. I don't think she would still feel good about it at the end of it all. So I think she needs to forgive herself. That's probably where redemption might come from.
What exactly? I think you're touching on something really interesting, Varsha, which is like the whole question of redemption and like, what is redemption? Like, is it something gifted to you, or is it something you find within yourself? Right? Like, is it making a concerted effort to be better and forgiving yourself for your past sins, or does it require some sort of external validation, I guess? And I think it's, I think philosophically, I certainly align with the idea that just like fundamentally redemption has to, at least to some degree, come inward. But I think it's a hard question, because certainly forgiveness and redemption they're not the same thing, right? And so what does that look like? What does it really mean? And how can someone be redeemed, particularly someone who's done something as horrible as pretty much anything any of our characters. I'm trying to think, what's the worst thing Kelmomas done?
I mean, Nair has done some pretty bad shit.
Yeah, but I don't think he was. Yeah, I mean, well, right, but like neither of them are actively potentially pursuing redemption. And as much as I wanted Nair to like wake up and decide to be a better person, that was never in the cards for him.
No.
As opposed to like Esmenet and Kelmoman, who I think actively do try to be better.
Yeah. Kelmoman has his unravel guilt that he carries with him everywhere, which is, arguably worse. Like, because Esmenet, found herself in a position where she knew the answer because she was living the answer, right? Would I rather be dead, or would I rather be alive and miserable, potentially, right? And so she makes that same decision for Mimara, whereas Kelmoman, though he was acting under orders from the Mandate, like, resulted in Inrao's death, from which, like, he can't be forgiven by Inrao for that.
I don't know if I blame him for that, though, because like,
no, he blames himself, though.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, it's also, that's an interesting moral conundrum, right? Like, should he have any blame because he knew he was putting Inrao in mortal danger, but at the same time, the stakes are seemingly so high with the second apocalypse that,
I mean, he did use him. Like, there's no, like, he did use him. He did, I don't know, spend him against the, reward of preventing the second apocalypse or finding out about the console, right? But it's still, what he did is still the same action.
I think the counter argument to that is Inrao was like a grown adult by that point, right? Like, he wasn't a child, like you could say Mimara was, right? For example. And that, I mean, not that I think it's even fair to begin to compare those two things, because they're just, the circumstances and everything are just so wildly different. But, Inrao at least has, I think, a more acceptable level of agency, particularly given that he had left Kelmoman in the past. And he knew he was going against his own. I mean, arguably, Inrao was doing something that is deeply sinful, right? Which is he was going against this organization that he believed to be holy and divine, and that he dedicated his life to, right? Like, that's a real betrayal. And I mean, he grapples with that. God, I love Inrao. I'm so sad we only got him for like 100 pages.
A little bit.
He was too sweet for this world.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess we're really going backwards here, but like, I can't remember now, like, did Kelmoman knew there was the more than implied threat that, like, if he couldn't use Inrao, then the Mandate would just take him out. Like, they were like, I can't remember the guy from the Quorum whose name started.
Not Zera.
Yes, that guy.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the other guy, not Zero,
Oh.
like the guy who seemed cool at first, but then he was actually like the dick, and not Zero was the
Yes.
cool. That was such a good. But anyway, I couldn't remember. I don't think Akamian ever told Inrao, like, if you don't help me, your life is in danger. I don't know if he ever made that, like, because then it's like, you know, Inrao is essentially being coerced.
I don't think he knew that because he left the Scarlet Spire City before they found the corpse, right, of his informant. So I don't think he was aware that his informant got killed, I think.
We definitely didn't know about that, but did he know that? I forget if they. I want to say, Justin, you're right that he thought about like that the leaders of the Mandate were like all but told him, maybe even did explicitly tell him that like we'll take out Inrao if you don't do something.
Yeah,
you know.
something
But
like that.
I don't know. I may be misremembering too. That wasn't long. Feels like ages ago.
Yeah. Sorry.
Fair enough.
No, I think they did use him as kind of a chip again. They used him as kind of a tool against him. So they did leverage him and his life for cooperation, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think so. I was going to ask if we wanted to talk about another very conflicted character in Sorweel.
Sorweel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Talk about someone who's too sweet for this world. He's doomed. Or he's going to become a monster or something. I don't know. He's like, you know, he really doesn't seem bad. Like he really is like relatively likable.
Yeah, he's put in a very difficult position though, I guess. And the way he's made like kneel in front of Cayutas, and I don't know, must not be easy.
I'm sorry, Dan. I was just going to mention, I think during the first trilogy, we talked about Akamian kind of being the reader in the story. I think Sorweel has become us. And he kind of hears about the history, the things that have happened during the first apocalypse that we know and some that we don't know, and then what's happened between the time jump from the end of the Thousandfold Thought to the beginning of the Judging Eye, and kind of hearing the stories and kind of everything. Because I think the first trilogy we've focused a lot on Kellhus, and now he's seemed kind of like a like a god, and people view him as a god, and so I think he has become kind of our eyes in that world. It seems like that's this kind of like the hopelessness that we would feel if we were lucky enough to be, you know, in a royal family that we were spared anyway, but otherwise we'd be on a pole somewhere impaled. But
on a pole, you say?
Yeah.
I do think, yeah, I agree. I mean, he in many ways is at this point. I mean, I'm trying to think like who else are any other? No, like he's by far and away the most likable of the characters, largely because he's an innocent, right? Like he hasn't done anything bad. You know, he's still a kid, and he's a kid who's really put upon. You know, I mean, relatively, again, he is a prince, but like, you know, he's a prince whose father was murdered and whose mom died when he was young, and you know, whose kingdom has been taken away from him, and who's forced to march with the threat of, you know, he has this sort of Damocles hanging over him, like he could mess up at any time and off with his head. It's rough. And I agree. I think he is in many ways kind of the reader POV, not only because he's sort of the most likable, but he is like, we are like him in that we are like trapped watching Kellhus. Like, what can we do? We can't. We're readers, you know. We're just watching Kellhus like unveil his horrible plan, and you know, forced to reckon. Like Sorweel is like, is it, you know, is he like, what is he? Is he the best, you know, choice to deal with this threat?
Is Kellhus's plan horrible though?
I mean, the empire of it all is definitely horrible.
It's for the greater good.
Yeah, right? I mean, that's the age-old question. You know, what ends can justify the means?
Is the extinction of the human race not the end which justify all means?
I
could
would,
argue.
certainly that's the debate, right? I would argue that I don't know that the human race is inherently doomed, with the only exception being that Kellhus has to create this tyrannical big brother empire. Like, that's the only option.
What would you do?
What would I do if I was in whose position? Because these are all wildly different.
I guess, yeah.
I also feel like there are ways Kellhus could do this sort of general idea without being so tyrannical too. But it's also tough, right? If he feels, I don't know, he's running out of time. Anyway, I've been talking a lot. Someone else can go.
Well, speaking of Sorweel and that very question that you guys are talking about, I was so pumped, and I feel like it does cement his position as kind of like the reader and the most sympathetic character to us, because he has that conversation with Saranga about Achaemen's histories of the First Holy War. And their conversation ends with the question with he's like, well, what does he fucking want? And then Zaranga's like, the wizard doesn't say. And you're just like, oh shit, that's what I want to know too, what does he want?
He wants to kill the consult.
Yeah, does he? I mean, he does. Why does he?
Next,
And I liked when Soranga, is that how? Yeah, okay. He tells Sorweel, and what I'm afraid you and I are going to find out before this madness is over. I was like, yeah, that's us. That's the reader. Hopefully. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's as simple as he wants to kill the consult and save the human race. That feels like far too simplistic a goal. Like I almost feel like I need Kellhus to have deeper motives than just because of how his character works.
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy who everyone was blown away that he was thinking past the Holy War. I think it was Nair who, like in the first trilogy, was like, "Oh my God, he's like thought of the future past Shime," and Kellhus has to have an idea of what he's going to do after destroying the consult, theoretically, right? And there's no way that plan is anything other than I'm going to take over the entire world. He's not, like, there's just no way.
To what end, though? Like, I mean, I would think that the Dunyan would not set any store by needing to hold power. It would be a means to an end, whatever power they need to hold. So the whole tyrannical empire that he has built, I don't think it's, I need to feel like the most powerful man in the world. It's, this is what I need to do to get something done. We may or may not agree that that's the right approach, but that's what he thinks he needs to do to get somewhere. So if he needs to take over the world, to what end? If he wants to, I don't know, run a world-spanning empire.
Well, Dunyan philosophy tells us that they want to grasp the absolute. That's what, right? So maybe that's the final plan?
I think he is deluding himself and is fully I don't even know if narcissist is the right word, but I think his ego is massive, and he absolutely does feel like he should just be in charge because he's the best. I mean, he
has those emotions, do you think?
He's proven it, I mean, he's broken before, and he clearly is being influenced by some outside force. What that is, unclear. But I think he fully believes he's deluding himself. I mean, I think in a big way, he also is influenced arguably by the darkness that comes before. And he just isn't aware of it, that he's cut himself off from a lot, but I don't think he is so fully unemotional. I think it's almost like a mirage, I mean, it's the same thing of like going to kill Moingus. Like, that's not an unemotional decision. The Dunyan themselves, like, it's not just like inherently logical. You know, I get that they're afraid of being discovered and like hurt, but like I don't believe that is just pure logic. Like you have to have a motive, and to have a motive, you have to be, you know, motivated by something. You know, there has to be want, there has to be desire. It's not reaching that, like, you know, again, clearly there's the parallel again with like Buddhism, but the whole idea of like reaching nirvana is like you cease to desire, and is my understanding, right? I mean, I'm not Buddhist, so but that is my understanding, right? And the Dunyin actively want things. And so if they want things, they are being influenced by the darkness that comes before in their own philosophy. And I think they've just deluded themselves.
Well, if they want things in order to achieve this final philosophical point, like maybe they feel like, oh, we need time to be able to genetically improve humans so we can reach a person which is completely devoid of any feelings or and he's able to dissipate the past and where his thoughts come from and everything like that, right?
But
and
I
maybe
even that is acting off of the darkness that comes before as a philosophical concept.
Yes.
Like even if you're going back to just the idea that we want to keep humanity alive, that is like, that's not a logical concept. There's nothing that comes from the base idea that humanity should be alive, that you have this desire, right? And so I think, anyway, I think I'm gonna start arguing saying things in circles, but I no longer believe Kellhus is immune. No, I think he is good at being a sociopath and like not feeling bad for other people, but I don't think that means that he is completely unemotional and has no desire really. And and if I mean, it's like it's sort of, you know, I don't know. I think I have mostly said my piece.
I don't know, Paul. I think if you're taking things purely from a materialistic perspective and not taking into account any, I don't know, emotion or any other religious reason or anything like that, then the survival and perfection of the species is the most naturalistic impulse that exists, because it's a thing that permeates every living being, and it's the main driving factor of, you know, everything which has life. So you could argue that that's, you know, they're sort of going back to the primal, the most materialistic, the most plain objective, I guess, for humans. But I don't know. I'm not saying that's the reason. I'm just saying you could argue that.
I mean,
I hear what you're saying.
I think like a couple of like the myriad options here for what's going on with Kellhus is like the Moengus is right. Kellhus is fucking crazy. Like the world broke him, you know, and he was one way, and now he's like this, you know, distorted, polluted version of himself. And I think the other thing, like, you know, like you said, the absolute, Dan, like what the Dunyin want is to become what they call self-moving souls, you know, to be what comes before. And in this world that like Bakker so clearly is like trying over and over again to demonstrate. I mean, like the beginning of chapter 9 or whatever with the whole bit with the, you know, it's a very like long stream of like deterministic, like, you know, actions in sequence. Right. And so like, if you become a self-moving soul in a world that is deterministic, then you are essentially a god, right? Like if the gods are above these, like, you know, the trappings of a deterministic world, then like, you know, maybe Kellhus, like I'm expecting Kellhus to do something like so fucked up and crazy, like he's gonna, you know, like destroy the consult, and then like he wants to become a god, or, you know, like, or, you know, like I don't know. I'm expecting him. Yeah, like maybe he wants to close the world, you know, like too, but like without the consult in it or something wild like that. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the gods are sort of, for Kellhus, I guess, at least in the first trilogy, they were the darkness they came before, in this sense, because that's the thing that he doesn't understand, which would be the origin of the things that are happening, right? And
Right.
yeah, and that's why he was imperfect in his eyes, probably, because he did not know that dark stuff came before, so he was still influenced by something he was not knowledgeable about and he could not control.
And so, like, as a Dunyan, like his goal just right there became to become like omniscient, or like, to somehow, be that. I mean, that's what they've always wanted, but he, developed a greater understanding of it, maybe, in the world.
Right. And like, are the gods even truly cut off from that, right? Like, what came before the gods? Did something come before the gods, right? Like, if they can act against each other, then that inherently means that they're not all powerful, right? And I mean, we do have that interesting metaphor of, right, like, that your parts, like your own body can fight against itself, the parts of the body. But that still means like an individual God is not necessarily, interesting philosophical questions.
Yeah.
Do you think the gods aren't subject to the darkness that comes before, though? At least as defined, Yatwer seems to be angry right now. That does not feel like an emotionless, purely logical being.
I'm with you. I think, yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows?
I guess the root of what I was trying to argue earlier is that a purely logical being would not be motivated to do anything and would therefore be frozen with indecision. That the very nature of deciding to do something means that you have a desire. Even if that desire is as base, genetic, I need to propagate the species and ensure its survival. That there is still, that is in some form the darkness that comes before.
Yeah. And Varsha, I think with that question you just asked, it makes me think of from the glossary from the Thousandfold Thought, the description of the outside as like this series of concentric rings that get less material and more toward like abstract will, or I can't remember how it was phrased now, but like maybe, the gods are the darkness that comes before in Irwa, and something else possibly comes before the gods. And
that's interesting. That they're just constantly expanding circles.
Titans.
Yeah, Titans, exactly.
Interesting.
I'd forgotten the circle metaphor, because that's interesting too. Just considering like, Christian mythology and like the circles of hell, right? There's 7, right? Which are not in the Bible. They come from Dante's Inferno, but is an interesting. I don't even know what that, like, where I'm going with that, but just the idea of these like circles upon circles of like these inner realms.
Yeah, I mean, even paradise is shown as circles within circles in the Divine Comedy.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah,
that too.
Who knows?
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm changing topic a little bit, but back to Sorweel. I think I've been noticing a lot of sort of intertwining of themes and metaphors between all the chapters and all the characters. Like, we talked about the ocean before with Yatwer, and I think there was an ocean comparison that I'm now forgetting, but Justin quoted from it earlier. And Sorweel, when he looks at Kellhus's army, he thinks about it as if it's an ocean and that he's drowning in it. And so, like, there's the drowning metaphor in both places. And then there's this huge parallel, it feels like. There's almost like a one-on-one, a one-to-one mapping between Sorweel's and Akamian's journey through, like, their marches. When Akamian finds friends, Sorweel finds friends. Akamian has, I don't remember, there was one other comparison that I'm now forgetting. But also, like, Sorweel has this whole internal monologuing the way Akamian does. So those are the two most, like, beautiful sections for me. Whenever we are in their heads, they get, like, super poetic, and Sorweel has all of these immense questions about what he's doing, his reflections on honor and betrayal. I thought that was all so brilliantly done. And yeah, I just love all of this intertwining that I'm noticing. I don't know if it wasn't quite as obvious in the first series, or I'm just not, and I'm only now, or if I'm only now noticing it as I'm getting more familiar with the world. But yeah, I think all of that is really beautifully done with echoes of each other.
Yeah, for sure.
It's possible that Bakker too is just intentionally drawing more parallels than he did even in the first series. I mean, I vaguely remember like noticing some between different characters, in particular, like, you know, Kelmomas and Esmenet and Nair and Akamian, and but you know, I think it's quite possible that he's just become even more, whether it's intuition or just like, you know, more intentional, right, with drawing these parallels, right?
Mm.
And even if he didn't, the fact that Barsha is seeing them doesn't diminish them in any way, right?
Absolutely.
Even if they're not intentional.
Absolutely.
Mm.
True. And by the way, I like the parallels you're drawing, Barsha. I think they're very apt.
Cool.
Yeah. What did you think of the little snippets we're getting of Zoom society and culture? Because we haven't gotten much up until now, right?
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. Oh, I loved that. Oh, yeah, that was the other sort of parallel between him and Akamian, except like the friendship. I'm hoping it builds into something like the one. I hope it doesn't end like that, but like the one with. Oh, I'm forgetting
Zen.
the name. The gender. Yeah, cinnamon.
Cinnamon. That's right. Yeah.
The Marshal of Atrempus.
Yeah. The
Venomous.
Yeah, I really enjoyed those sections with the conversations. I especially loved the one that you guys were talking about earlier, in which the reveal happens about, like, in which Sorweel finds out about a coming, like just the whole how that whole thing was set up. I don't know his name. I don't know how to say it, but how he looks around before and lowers his voice before telling him. And I really loved the focus on the translator, how it's easy to think that they're talking to each other, but the fact that Bakker keeps bringing this translator back into the picture, and sometimes he's inserting his own person into the conversation, like when he tries to tone it down when repeating something that the prince is saying. Sometimes I think that attention to detail there, I thought, was brilliantly done, right? Because they speak different languages, and how are they communicating? But yeah, also. And I like the relief it gave. Sorry, I'm not really answering your question. I guess I'm just rambling, but I really liked the attention. What? Yeah, the little bit of, I guess, forgiveness that Sorweel is able to give himself. That a nation this big had to cave to the Aspect Emperor. I don't think he's ready yet to forgive himself for being the sole survivor, but I think this will help him get there, and I like that for him. But I also want him to grow out of, like, I feel like he's building up to be something super important, right? I would like for him to continue being a likable character while he gets there. And I want him to be. That's true. I mean, it's the level of mistakes that people make, right? Like with Akamian, he did a lot of things that made me angry at him, but I still like him. So we'll see.
Yeah. And how crazy was the whole story we got about the emissaries to Zoom that cut their throats, and the whole position it put the king on?
Yeah.
It's like,
oh yeah, that was brilliant.
Very Kellhus move. Very Kellhus move.
Yeah.
Ditto to everything you were saying, Barsha. I am so scared of Sorweel becoming a little monster. I just don't see that in him. Like, he doesn't seem like he's, but who knows, right? I mean, he's in such a desperate position, right? I very much feel like, I mean, he's got to be important in some way, because we've been given so, like, he's been one of our main POVs. And so I certainly expect him to have a real big role to play in this story. Although I am afraid that he's just going to die at the end of this first book, and that he's just going to be. I don't even know what that would. I don't know. I could just see him being a POV to the initial march, and then we'll see. I don't even know how it would work or how it would happen, but that's what I'm afraid of happening. I really like Zoronga too, and I forget the translator's name. I hope I'm remotely pronouncing that correct. I'm also afraid for them because they also seem too cool, and like they're not really crappy people. That's like the big difference between like everyone at Kamian is now surrounded with, and like even like Mimara, who's like deeply tortured, and I feel really bad for her, but like I don't trust her as far as I can throw her. Like she's a zealot. She's so traumatized that like she's likely to do, to hurt people, right? And I certainly, I don't know.
But I could see Sorweel doing something really terrible because he's afraid, scared, or being pressured into doing it, right? Like, not because he's a sadist or he's an evil person,
Right.
but I can see him, like, the situation, putting him in a situation in which he would do something like that. It's not always, you don't have to be always a bad person. No, I'm just saying you don't always have to be a bad person to do something.
I agree. I agree with that.
Like, bad things can come from strength and from weakness.
He's very suggestible, it seems like, at this point. And so, it's interesting the way Saranga, and I can't remember his father's name or the translator's name, but what little we get about the Ziyumi is like he presents them as like much more moral than the Mansurian, right? Like because his father wasn't sure how to react to the emissaries that were sent to cut their own throats in front of him, and before him. Like we know exactly how the Nansur would have reacted to that, right? So if like Zaranga is like, if he's telling the truth, which he could be completely making shit up because nobody knows anything about Sayumi, like he could easily manipulate Sorweel, but I hope that doesn't happen. I hope it's more of a Cinemus and a Kamian type of relationship, because could use a splash of something hopeful in here, I feel like.
Yeah, that's the other fear for me with them, is that they're manipulating him. I could definitely see that happening.
I kind of like the translator. I hope. Yeah, just all wishful thinking here, isn't it? I really liked the section in which I forget what it is, but he starts to believe that it is true because oh man, I'm forgetting it, but it was so
what
beautiful.
Is true?
The thing that his teacher, the Mandate Schoolmen, tells him, the metaphor that he creates with the vase inside the vase, and he breaks it and he says Kellhus is this whole absolute spirit, like is a representation of that, and we are the pieces, and he's bringing us all together or whatever. And I think Sorweel doesn't want to believe it, but I'll try to find the quote. But I thought that was brilliant how sorry, I highlighted it on my Kindle, but it's the thing that if you pretend to be something for long enough, you might become the thing. It's a play on that, except it's done really brilliantly. I'll try.
These books are filled though with clever sounding aphorisms and things which sound like, oh yeah, this is true, but it's like the worst people telling it, or they're obviously not sincere.
Yeah, but this is Sorweel living that out.
Yeah.
It's not him saying a thing that sounds true. It's him experiencing this happening, which is why I thought it was brilliant. Why don't I have the highlight?
But we've had like nice description or people thinking things about Kellhus, which we knew were not true, but the people were described in a very, if I was him, I would believe it 100%. And it sounds very poetic and very, in their mind. But
Yeah. I mean, Kellhus is horrible, which is why the chapters with Esmenet and Kelmomas were miserable for me, because it's like her and Kellhus all over again. And man, this kid is being so explicit about manipulating her. Kellhus at least had some subtlety, and this. Okay, we'll get there. But
yeah.
what was it? We're not equal. The young king trailed. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
oh yeah. So I think one, he's happy that he understood. Here we go. So he gives that whole vase metaphor, right? And then he asks Sorweel if he understands. Sorweel did understand so much that his skin had pimpled listening to the sorcerer speak. He understood more than he wanted. The Keonetic priests had only rules and stories, nothing like this. They had no answers that made sense of things. Which one, I loved that you're someone who's been subject to rules and just this is how it is because I said so, versus this is something that you have to understand and you don't like what it is you are understanding. I like that. I liked that description. And then and then this bit. Then he finally decided to think Escale's thoughts, if only to pretend they had not already possessed him. What was the harm of thinking? Which, in the process of thinking, he starts to believe it, I think.
I really like in this section you're talking about too, how the teacher comes across, the Mandate sorcerer comes across really likable, like he's affable and like, Sorweel finds him boring, but like, I think there's something charming about that. And we know he's a spy in a sense, Sorweel knows that, but it does kind of make you, unless we find out, which is very possible, that he just sucks and is actually just like, a pedophile or something horrible, which I don't think he is. I want to be clear. I mean, even if, like, I don't think they would assign a pedophile. That was a poor choice because they're not so stupid, to assign a pedophile to teach a kid, But my point being that if he's a monster in some way, it could be possible, but I hope Bakker keeps it where this guy is just like, he's just a believer, and, he's like a decent person, because that's like such a classic thing that, like, decent people fall for tyrants and, zealots and any number of things, right? Like the world's more complicated, than just like it's sort of black and white. Like he could be a decent person. So I really hope he doesn't turn out to be like a monster. It would just be much less interesting, I think.
I mean, we're very jaded though with how we're seeing things, right? Because we're seeing the back, but if we're thinking how these people are living it, they're living like the realization of the prophecy. Like this is a more like they're marching against the enemy. They're like sort of the Mandate Schoolmen. This is their calling, their life calling, right? I don't know. Like the witches became a thing. Like all these witches finally have a place where they can practice magic, and they, like a lot of these people, this is their destiny pretty much, right? And they're together with thousands of other people which are all driven by the same objective, and that's a very powerful thing, even in our normal life, right? So
definitely,
I like how this does show though, like how the Mandate Schoolman he's so. And maybe this is the thousandfold thought. Did we ever determine exactly what the thousandfold thought is? But it's like, he's so sold on Kellhus's bullshit that he's able to sell Sorweel on it. So it's sort of like Sorweel is being inhabited by Kellhus via this other, this like third person, and like that's Kellhus's true power, like is the ability to inhabit people through other people. Like he is so seductive. The shit that he's selling is just like so potent that like he just fucking murdered Sorweel's father, like, I don't know, a week before. And Sorweel, through hearing this from somebody else, starts to think, oh shit, like, no, this makes sense. Maybe this is it, like, what? It's been a fucking week, like, it's crazy. Like, but the way that like Bakker writes it, it's it is like he illustrates it so nicely. It doesn't seem outlandish.
No.
You mean you wouldn't believe in Kellhus if you were in those there? I don't know.
I mean, he sounds pretty believable. I probably would.
He looks pretty divine. He looks like every time we see him, he's like an elemental force or something, right?
Yeah.
This whole reality seems to bow to his presence. So I don't know. I feel I would be probably a believer.
Yeah.
There's someone teleporting around and like pulling off this stuff who seems like he can read your mind. Like it would be hard to deny,
Yeah. And maybe he is being inhabited by God, and at that point, then like you're believing the right thing, technically.
Yeah, it's true.
If you're believing God's, like, right?
Yeah.
What do we think, ending kind of this conversation about Sorweel, what was going on there at the end with the slave and the Yatwerian spitting on the eyes and things? Like I could tell magic was being done, and I thought he was gonna like maybe he's unlocking the judging eye. I don't know. Like something was going on with his eyes. You could like see anew, but we didn't get a description of like what was. I don't know. That was left really vague for me, so I wasn't sure, and curious your all's thoughts.
No, just a weird display of magic.
Cool,
No
we're on
thoughts.
the same boat. Yeah.
No idea what's going on. Every single Yatwerian ritual, I don't know, is more confusing than the one we saw before. But yeah, it is interesting. It makes for a far more interesting world than the one we had in the first series, right? I think, I don't know, it was almost like we were led to believe, or at least this was my conclusion from the end of the first series. Sure, we had the appendix that told us about all these other gods, and they were occasionally referenced, but it felt like they were all destroyed and demolished in favor of the two prophets' religions, which were presumably sister religions worshipping the same god in some form. But yeah, it's interesting to see all these cults and their rituals, and that slave is becoming a more interesting character every chapter. And I loved the description of, Sorweel never had a grandfather, and this dude is treating him like one, and why? Yeah, I liked all of that. I'm very curious to see where that goes.
I can't tell if he's sweet or creepy. Like I want to believe he's sweet, but like there's not. Maybe it's his yellow eyes. I don't know, but like or maybe it's just because I have no idea what the hell he's doing, and we literally can't understand him because he's not speaking the same language as Sorweel. Oh man.
Yeah.
I just have a bad feeling about whatever Yatwerian magic is going on there.
That's true.
I'm kind of excited about it.
Well, yeah, I'm excited too. Like honestly, I as I said with Kellhus in the first trilogy, like I'm here for the mess. Like I want to see it all go to shit. So I just want Sorweel to survive. I'm attached now, and they already took Sweet Sammy so quickly.
I feel like every time Carl gets attached to a character, we can expect them to go within 3 chapters.
They're doomed.
First it was Indrao, then it was the what was the name of the minister? Ikurai.
Oh yeah, the guy who got replaced by the skin spy.
Yeah, that
I don't even remember why I liked him. You know what? Proyas is still around though, and Proyas is one of my faves. I maybe like him more than ever before, even though we've barely gotten any of him, just because he seems to like. I don't know. He's just so sad. I guess I'm a sucker for like people who just feel really bad about everything they're doing.
But they do it anyway.
It's one of the few people trying to be a better person,
right?
And thinking about things and trying. Even maybe he's not doing it, but at least he's trying. Just like Sorweel, right?
It's giving me big Jaime Lannister, and so I think it's hitting me there. That's my weak spot.
I'm here for sad Proyas too, because he's got a little Acamian in him. He's a doubter.
Yeah.
Like that's why he's fucking sad.
That's the secret sauce for me, I think, is that he's got a little bit of Acamian's, skepticism, his spark inside him.
Yeah.
I like that. Speaking of, I also liked the glimpse that we got, like a wider glimpse into Mandate Schoolmen. I guess all the other Mandate Schoolmen we met were terrible, and Akamian didn't like them, so I suppose we didn't like them to a certain extent. But this guy, when what's his name, Sorweel asks him if he needs a more comfortable chair, or like if he's offended because he doesn't have a good place to sit. He's like, the nightmares I see every night, it's fine. Like, I can deal with this. So so I liked that. Akamian, we almost get the sense throughout the first series that he's alone in his misery, but he's not. The entire school of people go through that every night. It's just that in that group, he was alone in his misery, and he had a more difficult time of it than the other schoolmen did. But
and presumably, a lot of the embedded Mandate Schoolmen spies were similar to Akamian in that way. Like, they were, felt lonely and felt isolated.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other Sorweel thing we need to discuss. Oh yeah, and Coyotes and Serva is also terrible, apparently. Did the school make her that, or was Esmenet just wrong that she was probably capable of love? And what's her name again? How does it end? Serva? How's her name?
I think it's Sorwa, yeah.
Serva.
Yeah, it's Sorwa.
Yeah. So she was miserable too, alongside the others. I do not like them. I hate all these kids. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about Coyotes yet.
Oh my god.
Murder spree. That was some wild stuff.
Yeah, talk about not trusting someone. I do not trust him.
And going back to what you were saying earlier, Carl, like the thing that they made Sorweel do, like bow down just for amusement, it seems like. And these are all presumably trained Dunian in some form, and they are just getting amusement out of this. Like, why? For all the things that Kellhus says, you don't need to stick with these forms, and you don't need to follow the religions and these rituals and so on. They are just being cruel. That seems to be their only motive here. So yeah,
I think they were for amusement, was it? I took it as just like they were teaching him what his place was, but not because they wanted, but because that's how the order of things is here. That's how I took it. Like, I didn't think he was enjoying doing it, but he was like, this is how you need to behave, because that's better for you and that's better for everyone.
But are they afraid of dissent then? Is that why they want to teach him his place? Because in their interactions with him, I guess it's obvious who is in power, and they probably don't need to feel the need to exert power. So is their purpose to show him his place so that he doesn't feel motivated to rise up against them somehow? Like, just, this is something we don't want to deal with?
I think it's more so he does what he's supposed to do in the presence of other people.
But the other people that they care about is just them and the Aspect Emperor, right?
Yeah, but they still need to maintain order, and they need to make everyone behave the correct way. They have to minimize as much as possible any interference with their plan, right? Because this is like I think we've had the description of how hard it will be the march to Golgotha and how strained their resources will be, right? So I think they're just trying to, like, everyone have their own place, just follow what we're saying. Let's try to. I think that's how I took it.
I mean, I think to me it sounds like y'all are saying the same thing. The main difference being that Varsha, you judge them for doing that, because it's like what you were saying, Varsha, is that it is about quelling dissent. It's about establishing a hierarchy, and that there is no moving around the hierarchy. I mean, because that's what these displays are all about, is just reinforcing a hierarchy. It's entirely what they're about. And I don't blame you for finding that annoying. I don't know why. I kind of like Mingus. I think it's because he's kind of a wild card. Like he's kind of crazy, like his dad, and like I don't. Again, I can't explain why, but I just get kind of like a fun wolfish vibes from him. I expect he's like horrible, but I don't know.
He's like the guy in the back of a saloon playing with the knives, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like he has that weird, kind of threatening but kind of fun vibe. I certainly would never want to know him. If I knew him in real life, I would be terrified of him. But that he's fun to read about.
True.
So far, so good.
All right, we're running late. Do we want to move on to?
Yeah.
Esmenet and Kelmomas. Is that? I think that's the only thread left to talk about, right?
The best child.
Kelmomas. Yeah.
Technically, you could talk about Seleucus, but I mean,
we'll get into
Seleucus.
The Black Horse.
Yeah, I think.
Not
I think we can discuss it next time.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. I think the next 3 chapters are all. Yeah, I don't know. Not much interesting happened there anyway, other than they saw some interesting architecture. But yeah, let's do Kelmomas because there's a bunch to talk about there.
It's gonna be so much fun next week.
Oh, cool.
I'm curious, why do you think Kelmomas killed the dude?
Did what he did.
Creepy tweet thing. I struggled to wrap my head around why he was doing that.
Exercise of power? I don't know. They did because
right. Is it that simple? Is it like he's like ripping the legs off the bug again? Like, because that was the only thing I could like fathom. I like couldn't, because it wasn't like I very clearly understood his motivations for why he killed his brother. Right? Like he wants to be mommy's favorite. Simple. I follow that. I wasn't sure why he killed this woman. He kills. Who does he kill? He kills the priestess, right?
Yeah, the head of a church, right?
Superior.
The public head of a church, I guess.
Right.
Well, she had insulted Esmenet.
Oh, so was it revenge?
Was he aware of that?
Yeah, I think he is aware of that.
He's aware of everything.
It followed from the conversation he overheard between Kellhus and Esmenet. Did anything transpire there that made him want to go after this woman?
Well,
because he's making things harder for Esmenet, right? Is he trying somehow to make her even more reliant on him, just to make everyone else hate her, so she only has him? Is that what she's trying to do?
It followed from the discussion about the skin spice, right? And the fact that Teliopa, how are we saying her name? Teliopa, she needs to be around Esmenet all the time because she can identify skin spice. And Kelmomas, although he has never done so, is sure that he can also identify skin spice. Is he planting something? Because the aftermath of that is that Esmenet concludes that skin spice did this.
Yeah. So,
is he planting evidence for the presence of skin spice just so he can feel more special in... Yeah, I feel like ultimately all his actions are motivated by wanting to get closer to Esmenet somehow. But...
He hates his father.
Yeah.
He loves Esmenet, like, impossibly, like, to an impossible degree. And maybe he's, possessed by a Jokely or whatever because like he's just sowing chaos in the meantime. Like.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I hated how he manipulated Esmenet by saying, "Oh, I can be some Armis if you want," trying to be all cute about it. That was horrible. I did not like that at all. at all. I think I hated that more than the scene in which he killed people.
Like, imagine being the mother in that situation, like being
Horrible.
manipulated.
Yeah.
It's,
And she's falling for it. She's like, oh no, he's more miserable than I am because he has lost a twin. Oh, I need to take care of him. I need to forget my own grief. And oh
Yeah.
God. Of course, like, I mean, all of that is well meant. I don't mean to make fun of Esmenet, but geez, like she's falling for it, as she should, I suppose. But it's just so much worse than it was with her and Kellhus.
yeah.
I'm not looking forward to seeing the fallout from this when she finally realizes. I think she's catching on though. There was the moment when she sees him in the mirror. She has a thought. I forget the details of said thought, but yeah, he.
Yeah, she suspects somewhere, even at this point in time when she's so like desperate for love with the loss of her son, like she still suspects somewhere, which is cause for hope, hopefully. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's gonna be brutal if she does figure it out, which I feel like inevitably, just dramatically, she has to figure it out at some point. Oh man, yeah, it's like the misery of learning that Kellhus is playing you that's nothing compared to your own child.
Yeah.
yeah,
Especially if she finds out he manipulated Sammy into essentially accidentally killing himself. Horrible.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll all be resolved in the last 120 pages. So looking forward to it.
I think we get another confirmation that Esmenet doesn't really think that Kellhus loves her, right? I think Kelmomas also thinks like, oh, she knows what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another like sort of like interesting thing. Like, what does she really think about Kellhus? I don't think we've had a point of view with her thinking about him, right?
Yeah, we did. In like
Did
this
we?
section, she thinks about how she knows he doesn't, she knows what Akamian said is true, and she doesn't love him, but she deals with him because of the children, and she still somehow thinks like maybe he is still this prophet, like that is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. She worships him. I think she even explicitly thinks like she still worships him, but she does not love him.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there was that line about how she has stopped thinking many things about him, but she never stopped thinking that he's a miracle when he shows up. And speaking of, we got some information about the nature of Kellhus's teleportation powers, translocation. Apparently, he can only go horizon to horizon and to places that he has been to before or studied before.
And
what do you?
Sorry,
go ahead.
So he has limits.
Yeah, and he was exhausted by the time he showed up here.
That's what yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. I was talking over you.
It's okay.
Yeah, and what was I going to say? So what do you guys think of the fact that he's still trying to convince Esmenet to be in power and convince her that she's important somehow, the same way he did was it in The Warrior Prophet, when he said you're going to be the mother of the new empire and so on? He's telling her that he needs to deal with this, that what you're pure or something. He tells her something that makes her feel, or that is meant to make her feel important. Why? What is she? Is she just a really good administrator of the empire and he needs her to continue to be, or like what does he want from her?
I think
Good
so.
question.
I mean, he maybe has a long-term plan, but I mean, I think it makes sense that just fundamentally he needs someone to like keep the peace. He literally cannot be everywhere at once.
Why not Mayfinet? Why not Mayfinet, for example?
Maybe he fears Mayfinet. I don't know. Maybe he's afraid he can't manipulate Mayfinet, or that there's some seed of Moingus in it. I don't know. That's speculation.
Yeah.
Maybe he believes in separation of church and state.
Kellhus,
The God Emperor.
He
The God
does.
Emperor wants to separate the church and state.
I mean, he is implementing that, right? Because he lives separately. He doesn't live in the palace. He has his own residence, apparently.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the purpose of that is so he keeps his authority as the head of the religion rather than like the. I don't think it's for. What am I saying? For the perception of fairness, I don't think that's his goal. I think it's more so that Maithanet still has whatever religious authority he has as the. Is it the head Shriya? Is that his title? I don't remember. But
He's
yeah.
the Shriya, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Ostensibly. I feel like you can say that about everything Kellhus does.
Yeah. Right.
Good word. We should just call him that. That's his name. Yeah. Yeah. So, any other Kelmomas thoughts? We talked briefly about who the voice in his head might be. So that was maybe we had some theories there, but yeah, we don't know. We don't know why he went and murdered a bunch of people for no particular reason. I feel like it has something to do with the topic of skin spice. I just don't know how it's related.
Yeah, because it's a very sort of convoluted way of killing people if you just wanted to kill random people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was also like he took a skewer, right? It was food, what he took.
Yeah.
He stole. I was like, oh, cute. He's behaving like a kid. And then he uses the skewer to go kill people.
So adorable. He's on a Surin Boris.
Cool. Any other closing thoughts about that? Or I guess
Quotes. I think we're ready for quotes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, quotes. I completely forgot about quotes. We got the quotes. Steve, you're up.
I like how I'm the quote guy now for some reason.
Yeah, that's
You have been elected.
Yeah. The one that stood out for me this time was the epigraph on chapter 10. Look into others and ponder the sin and folly you find there, for their sin is your sin, and their folly is your folly. Seek ye the true reflecting pool. Look to the stranger you despise, not the friend you love.
What does it mean?
To look at what you dislike more than what you like, and you'll learn more about yourself that way, I guess. In a nutshell.
Yeah.
I think so.
or that you tend to dislike people because you don't like parts of yourself, and you see that in them.
All of the above. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's more important all the books we don't like and all the videos critiquing all the bad movies and bad books. That defines what we are, I guess.
Well, is it about the things or the people, though? Is it? No, yeah, you're right. I don't agree.
I guess you could see it as look at the things you dislike, and you'll learn more about yourself that way than think, because it takes you. I don't know. We can spend a long time discussing that one. Yeah.
I took it as look at the things you despise because that's who you are, because you despise your own weaknesses. You don't want to confront your own weaknesses, and the things you love are maybe what you want to be, but you're not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
Again, lots
harder.
of principles. You can interpret them in a lot of ways.
It's harder to look. It's more of a comfort to look at things you enjoy and things that make you feel safe than it is to look at things that don't make you feel that way and wonder why, and explore those places.
True.
Good
Nice
quote.
quote.
More.
Ain't nobody got time for that. I don't have as many quotes in this series as I did last series. It's mostly just
Really?
epigraphs. Yeah.
I
Lots of
thought
good.
there were
Yeah.
a bunch which are like, or phrases which were like really well constructed.
Hmm.
I thought. especially like the whole chapter, like you were reading before, the whole chapter about the Yatwerian. Like there are a lot of very good quotes, I feel, hidden in there.
The ones that the ones that I really had written down, I'm afraid to mention because I think it would spoil some things. So I'm a little hesitant to bring some things up because the ones that stood out most to me were the ones that could kind of possibly, because yeah, I don't want to say
That makes sense.
Man, spill the tea.
yeah, no, you.
I don't have like a direct quote, but I just thought in the chapter where they're approaching the the slog, the skin eaters and a cowman are approaching the non-man mansion. And there's these like really beautiful descriptions of the natural world as being very awe-inspiring. And I thought with some of the imagery around Yatwer and being very like earth focused and her being the fertility goddess, I just thought maybe that was Bakker kind of like trying to draw on the power of the natural world a little bit. I just thought there were some cool passages in that chapter where Akamian is like, it's his POV and it's like really like waxing poetic about, some of that, the power of nature and all that. It was really great.
Even when he talks about the non-men and how the humans killed them, there's some quite good quotes and reflections on humanity there too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed that whole section quite a bit. It was a nice review also, and some new information. But
yeah.
Did have a question for each of you, because on page 205 it does mention he thinks a dragon hides in the black halls. A dragon. Who thinks we'll see a dragon in the black halls?
Me.
Looks like it.
Listeners, Varsha's raising her hand too.
Justin's not convinced.
I am not. I don't think I'm ready for a dragon yet.
I want a Balrog. Give me a Balrog.
Exactly. We got to have some Balrog equivalent, and they've set up a dragon. If it's not a dragon, it'll be the Bashrag, which sounds like Balrog, so that's the entire basis of that theory. Or some other, I don't know, entity. There will be something in the black holes.
I'm hoping for some new console constructed nightmare that we haven't seen before.
That would be cool.
I just want some dragons.
I agree. There haven't been enough dragons. Need more dragons.
Yeah, but the whole description of the whole part with Akamian describing the story of a mansion, it's also very, again, Lord of the Rings. Gimli describing the Moria and how he was when he was there and all those things.
It's very interesting too that it's unclear what happened, right? And that there are these three stories, right? And you're left to wonder which, if any of them, are true.
I mean, didn't we sort of get an answer for that? That the Mandate Schoolmen thought that they knew the timeline, that all of it happened within a year. So there wasn't enough time for plots involving pregnancies and like second generations of people or whatever. I read that when I was half asleep for some reason, and I forgotten most of it. But yeah,
you're right. But I still think, I mean, it's unclear, right? So it could be none of that, right? Like, who knows what happened, right? It's the ambiguity that stands out to me more than anything. That like, add reasonable ambiguity, right? As there should be. That it's like it's unclear what exactly happened.
But I think even Akabian thinks about like, you can choose whichever one you want depending on your poetic sensibilities, because in fact it doesn't matter. Like the end result and the end thing is always the same, right?
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice comment on history and histor.
Definitely.
True.
I did find a quote between Kellhus and Esmenet, Page 225. Most live on the edge of heartbeats, trusting their betters and the blind eyes of habit to see them further. A rare few can apprehend the span of their entire lives.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
True. I like some of the words he chooses for things, like the span, or when he talks about people judging other people, he talks about measure. I really like the word. There's some really good choice of words, or like the choice of using mansions to describe cities of. I don't know, they're all very evocative for me, at least.
I agree.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think to your point about finding fewer quotes, Steve, I think in here the passages are longer to be more beautiful. They're more beautiful and more detailed descriptions. So like it's not single line quotes. I've usually highlighted entire paragraphs of things. So I have one that I like a lot. In Sorweel's POV. The great ordeal, a thing so great that not even the horizon could contain it. And for a boy on the cusp of manhood, a thing that humiliated far more than it humbled. What honor could dwell in a soul so small?
Yeah, that is really good.
Ooh, I also liked power is recognition. Like Esmenet had these musings about how there was this whole description of the position, the vulnerable position in which she was sitting, but that was the most powerful position because like she has all this protection from the other places. And like all her musings on power dynamics there, along with when the woman does not respect her, the Yatwerian matriarch, and she realizes that you don't have power unless other people recognize that you do. I thought that was brilliant.
I think she says something. She confused the trappings of power with power itself.
Yeah,
Something like
that too.
right?
Yeah. That was the line preceding the one about recognition. And there was something here about betrayal too that I thought was very nice. And I loved every single time Sorweel thinks to himself that how he's struggling to find dignity in the really small things he does. All of those lines are brilliant. I think I've come across them multiple times, but yeah. Cool. Expressions all spoke in the same language. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Steve, you were saying something?
No, I was trying to get him. I was giving a Chris cool.
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 We gotta clip that bit and show it.
Cool. Yeah. Pretty cool. Yeah.
That's spot on, actually. That's really good.
Oh god, I have to remember to clip that and share it on the forum. Yeah, cool. Let's do outros then. Let's see. I'll pick randomly. Justin.
Hey, I'm Justin. You can find me on Page Chewing, Justin Midnight, or midnightmovietrain.com.
Nice. I guess I'm Dan. You can find me on Page Chewing Forum, DNFire17, or you can find me in bed in about half an hour. If you desire that. I'm alone tonight for space. So we'll see. Carl?
Yeah, I'm Carl D. Albert, and you can find me at that on a lot of social media or on the Page Chewing forum.
Trying to figure out how to get to Vancouver in the next 30 minutes, but find me on pagestream.com. You can find all a bunch of stuff there. Come on by and say hello and tell us how wrong we are about everything. It's great.
Please.
Yeah. That's a good way to make friends with. And you can find me on my YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain, and I hang out on the Patreon forum all the time. My blackjack addiction has cut back a little bit lately because I keep losing points. But if you'd like to discuss this book with us, either here or on the forum, come check out the Patreon forum. That's where we do all our planning for this series and many, many others. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in about a week.